Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to fix something that wasn't yours to fix? Have you ever stayed up all night trying to solve a problem that only God could solve? You see, we live in a world that teaches us to hustle harder, to grind longer, to control everything. But let me tell you something today that will set your soul free. You were never designed to carry what only God can handle. The truth is, there are some things in your life that are outside of your control, and that's not a weakness, that's an opportunity. That's not a burden, that's a blessing in disguise. Why? Because when you come to the end of your ability, that's where God begins to show his. So we waste so much of our energy trying to manipulate the outcomes, trying to fix people, trying to control timing. But here's a revelation. Worry doesn't change your outcome, it just drains your faith. Let me say that again for the people in the back. Worry is a thief. It steals your peace, it robs your joy, and it disconnects you from your power source. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to have it all figured out. God never called you to control. He called you to trust. And trusting God means saying, Lord, even when I don't understand, I believe you've got a plan. Even when I can't trace your hand, I'll trust your heart. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not telling you to be passive. I'm telling you to be passive. I'm telling you to be powerful. Because power doesn't come from control, it comes from alignment. And when you align your will with God's will, you unlock supernatural results. You want to see your life shift. You want to see doors open. You want to see peace that makes no sense. Then stop trying to play God and let God be God. And let God be God. You may not control the storm, but you serve the one who commands the wind and the waves. You may not control the outcome, but you walk with the one who declares the end from the beginning. You may not have all the pieces, but God is the master builder and nothing is missing in his plan. So here's your call to action. Stop worrying, start trusting, release the burden, grab hold of faith, take your hands off what you can't control and raise them in worship to the one who controls everything. Because the moment you let go of control is the moment God steps in with power, provision, and peace. And that, my friend, is where your breakthrough begins. That you were never meant to carry what only God can handle. This truth is simple, yet it's something so many of us struggle to embrace. We've been conditioned by society to believe that we must always be in control. That if we just try harder, plan more, and push through, we can handle everything life throws at us. And the longer we believe that lie, the more we find ourselves overwhelmed, exhausted, and disconnected from the very source of our strength. See, the weight you're carrying was never yours to bear. You're trying to fix things you didn't break. You're trying to solve problems that were never assigned to your hands. You're running yourself into the ground, trying to make outcomes line up the way you think they should. But here's the reality. There are battles in your life that are spiritual, not logical. There are situations that require divine intervention, not human manipulation. And as long as you keep trying to carry God-sized problems in human strength, you're going to keep breaking down. It's like trying to lift a car with your bare hands, not because you're lazy, but because you're human. You were never built to carry certain loads. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise when you choose to let go and give it to the one who can handle it. God's shoulders are bigger than yours. His vision is wider. His power is limitless. He sees the entire picture while you only see a frame. So when you're holding on tight, trying to control every detail, you're actually limiting what God can do in your life. Because he won't compete for control. He steps in when you step back. Think about this. Some of the anxiety you're feeling, some of the fear that's been keeping you up at night isn't because your situation is impossible. It's because you're trying to be the savior in a situation that requires the savior. You weren't created to be your own deliverer. That's God's role, and he's really good at it. But he's waiting for you to release it. He's waiting for you to say, God, I don't have the answers. I can't see the way. But I trust that you do. That kind of surrender isn't weakness, it's worship. That kind of trust is what opens the door for peace to flood your heart. And let's be honest, even when you've tried to control everything, how much has it really helped? How often has your worry changed the outcome? How many times has your overthinking solved the problem? The truth is, more often than not, it's only made things worse. It's taken your focus off of God and put it on yourself. And that's a dangerous shift because you were never designed to be the source of your own strength. Your strength comes from the Lord. Your peace comes from Him. Your provision, your direction, your answers, all of it flows from the throne of grace. So today, take a deep breath and understand this. It's okay to let go. It's okay to admit that you don't have it all figured out. It's okay to rest, not because the situation is solved, but because you've finally given it to the one who can solve it. You were never meant to carry what only God can handle. So stop carrying it, trust Him with it, and watch Him do what only He can do. Worry doesn't change outcomes. It drains faith. Ons, this is a powerful and often overlooked truth. When we worry, we believe we're doing something productive, like we're preparing for the worst or somehow staying one step ahead. But in reality, worry only works to undermine our faith and steal our peace. It doesn't give us control over the situation. It only amplifies our fears and magnifies the problem. The more we dwell on it, the more power we give to what we're afraid of, and the less we rely on the power of the one who can actually change things. Think about how many times you found yourself lying awake at night, going over the same scenario in your mind. You imagine every possible outcome, every what if. It can feel like you're in constant motion, but in truth, you're stuck in a loop. Worry makes you feel like you're doing something, but you're not really moving toward a solution. You're just running in circles, trapped in your own thoughts. And as you do that, you drain your mental, emotional, and spiritual energy. Worry keeps you from taking action because you're too paralyzed by fear to move. It keeps you from resting because you're so consumed by the what ifs that you can't let go. But here's the catch. Worry doesn't actually change the outcome. No matter how many scenarios you play out in your mind, no matter how many hours you spend stressing about the situation, the end result remains out of your hands. The Bible tells us in Matthew 6:27, can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? The answer is no. Worry doesn't add anything beneficial to your situation. It only subtracts from your peace, your focus, and your ability to trust God. The more you worry, the more you pull your attention away from what truly matters. You're focused on the problem instead of the solution. You're focused on what you can't control instead of trusting the one who holds everything in his hands. And when you're consumed by worry, you're less likely to act with faith. Faith requires trusting in the unseen. It requires believing that even when things look impossible, God is still working. Worry, on the other hand, is rooted in fear. It says, I don't know how this will work out, and I don't trust that God will provide. Worry and faith cannot coexist. One will always overshadow the other. The more you feed your worry, the more you starve your faith. Faith, on the other hand, doesn't require all the answers. Faith is trusting that God's got it, even when you don't know how He's going to do it. Faith says, I believe that God is bigger than my problem. I believe He can make a way where there seems to be no way. It's an active trust that says, even though I don't know how this will turn out, I believe it's already in His hands. And the more you choose to trust, the more you shift your perspective from your limitations to His unlimited power. The thing about worry is that it's a thief. It robs you of your peace and leaves you feeling drained, anxious, and overwhelmed. You can't think clearly when you're caught in a spiral of worry. You miss out on the joy that comes with living in the moment. You're constantly living in a state of anxiety, never allowing yourself to truly rest. But when you let go of worry, when you make the conscious decision to trust God with your situation, something shifts inside of you. You start to experience a peace that doesn't make sense. You start to feel a release from the burden of carrying it all by yourself. Worry doesn't change the outcome. It doesn't fix the problem. It doesn't make things easier. All it does is drain you of the strength you need to keep moving forward in faith. The key is to recognize that you don't have to hold on so tightly to the things you can't control. God is bigger than any situation, and He's always at work, even when you can't see it. So instead of worrying, choose faith, choose trust, choose peace, and watch how your life starts to change when you stop carrying what was never meant for you to carry in the first place. Trust is greater than control. In our world, we're often told that control is the key to success, happiness, and security. From a young age, we're taught to manage our time, organize our lives, and make sure everything goes according to plan. And while there is wisdom and preparation and responsibility, we must understand that there are things beyond our control. things that no amount of planning, worrying, or working can change. This is where trust steps in. Trust is not about controlling the outcome. It's about relying on someone who has the power to shape the outcome, even when you can't see how it will happen. Control is an illusion. No matter how much you try to manipulate a situation, the ultimate outcome is not in your hands. It's easy to think that if we just have enough systems in place, if we just keep everything in line, we can manage the chaos of life. Things don't always go according to plan. People don't always act the way we expect them to. Circumstances change without warning, and we're left with no choice but to adapt. And in those moments, our ability to control what's happening becomes limited. What can we do when we realize that the reins we've been holding onto so tightly are slipping away? The answer is simple: trust. Trusting in God means letting go of the need to control every aspect of your life. It means acknowledging that while you may have a plan, God's plan is always greater. You might not always understand why certain things are happening or why things aren't going the way you thought they would. But in those moments, your faith in God's plan is what holds you steady. Trust doesn't mean sitting idly by while things fall apart. It means taking action based on the belief that God is leading you, even when you don't fully understand the direction. It's about surrendering the desire to control outcomes and choosing instead to trust that God has it all figured out. When you trust God, you're acknowledging that there is a higher power at work. You're saying, I don't have to know every detail. I don't have to figure everything out. I believe that God is in control and that his ways are always better than mine. Trusting in God doesn't mean that you're giving up. It means that you're stepping into a space where his wisdom and strength fill the gaps that you can't handle on your own. There's a peace that comes from releasing control and allowing God to take the lead. It's the peace of knowing that you don't have to carry the burden of everything on your own shoulders. When we choose trust over control, we also choose to release the anxiety that comes with trying to manage everything. Think about how much mental and emotional energy is drained from trying to control things that are beyond your reach. How many sleepless nights have you had worrying about things you can't change? How often have you found yourself stressing over outcomes that you can't influence? The truth is, worrying about the future, trying to control every situation only brings more stress and frustration. But when you choose to trust, you free yourself from that burden. You can focus on what's within your control, your actions, your attitude, and your response, and leave the rest in God's hands. Trusting God with the things you cannot control also brings a sense of freedom. Freedom to live without fear of the unknown. Freedom to step forward even when you don't have all the answers. Freedom to make decisions based on faith, not fear. It allows you to live boldly, knowing that no matter what happens, God is guiding you and will provide everything you need. And in that freedom, you discover a deep sense of peace, the kind of peace that comes not from knowing all the answers, but from knowing the one who holds them. Choosing trust over control is not about passivity. It's not about sitting back and doing nothing while life unfolds. It's about choosing to act in faith, knowing that your efforts are part of God's bigger plan. It's about aligning your will with his and having the confidence that no matter what happens, he is in control. The more you trust God, the more you open yourself up to the incredible supernatural work he wants to do in your life. You are no longer burdened by the need to control, but empowered by the freedom that comes from trusting in his perfect plan. Power comes from alignment, not control. This is a profound truth that often challenges the way we approach life. We live in a world that emphasizes control as the key to success, fulfillment, and security. We're taught to grab hold of the reins, steer the course, and make things happen. But the reality is, true power doesn't come from us forcing everything into our own framework. True power comes when we align ourselves with something greater than ourselves, when we align with God's will. You see, when we try to control every aspect of our lives, we're essentially telling God that we don't trust his plan. We're saying that our understanding, our ways, and our timing are better than his. But here's the thing. God's ways are higher than ours, and his thoughts are far greater. No matter how hard we try to control, we are limited by our human perspective. God, on the other hand, sees the bigger picture. He knows what's coming ahead. He sees the twists and turns, and he knows exactly what needs to happen in our lives to bring about the best possible outcome. The real power comes when we align with that plan. When we let go of our desire for control and yield ourselves to his wisdom, we tap into a strength far greater than our own. Aligning with God's will means acknowledging that we don't have all the answers, but that we trust the one who does. The one who does. It's not about passivity or complacency, but about positioning ourselves in a way that allows God to work in us and through us. When we surrender our desire to control every outcome and instead trust God to guide us, we find that things start to fall into place in a way we never could have orchestrated ourselves. There's a flow that happens when we align with his purpose. It's as if we stop swimming against the current and start moving with it. When we move in sync with God's will, we are empowered to move in ways that bring transformation, not just to our own lives, but to the lives of others around us. Think of a car engine. The engine works best when all the parts are working in harmony with each other. If any part tries to force its way or go against the design, it creates friction and dysfunction. But when the engine parts are aligned, everything works smoothly and efficiently. The car moves forward with power, speed, and precision. Similarly, when we align ourselves with God's will, we stop creating unnecessary friction in our lives. We stop wasting energy on things that don't matter and instead focus our efforts on the things that do. When we align our actions with God's purpose, we experience a power that is beyond our own, a power that moves us forward even when the road ahead seems unclear. This alignment doesn't just come from making a decision once and forgetting about it. It's a daily, intentional choice to submit our will to God. It's about seeking his guidance every day and asking him to lead us in every area of our lives. It's about choosing to let go of control and instead allowing him to direct our steps. This is where true strength lies, not in fighting for control, but in surrendering our will to God's. And the beauty of alignment is that it brings peace. When we stop trying to control every detail and instead trust that God has everything under control, we are free to move forward with confidence. We are no longer burdened by the weight of trying to make everything happen. Instead, we step into a place of rest and reliance on God's power. It's a peace that comes from knowing that he's in control, even when the circumstances don't make sense. It's a peace that enables us to walk boldly into the unknown because we know that God is already there, guiding our steps. True power is not in our ability to control, but in our ability to align ourselves with the will of God. When we do, we find strength, peace, and purpose. We find ourselves moving forward with confidence, knowing that we are part of something far greater than ourselves. We become conduits of God's power, and through that alignment, we can accomplish things we never could have on our own. Power comes from alignment, not control. And when we align ourselves with God, we tap into a force that is unstoppable. God commands what you cannot control. This is one of the most liberating truths we can embrace. So often in life, we try to control things that are completely out of our hands, and we end up feeling frustrated and overwhelmed. We try to manipulate situations, we try to change people, and we try to orchestrate outcomes according to our own understanding. But the reality is there are things in life that only God can control. He is the one who commands what we cannot. And when we recognize this, we free ourselves from the burden of trying to do the impossible. Take a moment and reflect on the things in your life that you've been trying to control. Think about the times you've invested countless hours and mental energy into a problem, only to find that no matter what you did, it didn't change the situation. Maybe it's a relationship that you've tried to fix, a career goal that's been out of reach, or a health challenge that just won't go away. These are things that are beyond our control, yet we often feel responsible for them. But here's the truth. God is in control of all things, and he commands what we cannot. He is the creator, the sustainer, and the ruler of everything. His authority stretches over the universe, and there is nothing outside of his power. When we recognize that there are things we simply cannot control, it is not a sign of weakness, but rather a sign of wisdom. Understanding the limits of our control frees us to rely on God, who can do what we cannot. When we release the burden of control, we make space for God to step in and do what only he can do. The Bible says in Psalm 115:3, our God is in heaven. He does whatever pleases him. This is a reminder that God is sovereign over all things. And when we allow him to take charge, he will work things out according to his perfect will. Think about the story of Jesus calming the storm. His disciples were in a boat facing a violent storm, and they were terrified. They were trying to row and control the boat, but the storm was too powerful. They couldn't do anything about it. They were completely out of their depth. But then Jesus, who was sleeping in the boat, woke up and spoke to the storm. He said, "Be quiet, be still," and the storm obeyed. The disciples were astonished, asking, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Mark 4:39-41. Jesus commanded what they could not control. The storm that had them terrified was immediately silenced at his word. This is the kind of power that God holds, a power that can calm the storms in our lives when we trust him with what we cannot manage on our own. In our lives, we often face storms, challenges, difficulties, and uncertainties that seem too big for us to handle. We may feel like we're being tossed around by the winds of life, and no matter how hard we try, we can't make it stop. But just as Jesus commanded the storm, he has the authority to command the circumstances in our lives. When we surrender control to him, we allow him to step in and speak peace to our hearts and our situations. The storm may not always cease immediately, but God's power can bring us the peace we need to endure, even in the midst of it. When we trust God with what we cannot control, we also open ourselves up to his timing. Often, we try to control outcomes by pushing for things to happen on our timeline. But God's timing is always perfect. We may not understand why things aren't happening when we want them to, but God sees the bigger picture. He knows the right moment for everything to fall into place. We need to trust that when we release control, we are also trusting in God's timing and his perfect plan for our lives. God commands what we cannot control. And when we let go of trying to control everything, we allow him to move in ways that we never could have imagined. We give him the space to do what he does best, to bring peace, healing, and provision in ways that go beyond our comprehension. Trusting in God's control over what we cannot handle brings freedom, peace, and a deeper reliance on his power. It's not about doing nothing. It's about recognizing that God is doing everything we need and more. When we let go, he steps in, and that's where the miraculous happens. Letting go is the first step to breakthrough. Many of us are holding on tightly to things that are preventing us from stepping into the fullness of what God has for us. Whether it's a fear of the unknown, an attachment to an old way of thinking, or a grip on control, these things create barriers that keep us from experiencing the breakthrough we desire. Breakthroughs don't come when we continue to do things in our own strength or insist on holding on to things that are no longer serving us. They come when we choose to surrender, to let go, and to trust that God's plan for us is greater than anything we can imagine. The first thing we need to recognize is that letting go doesn't mean giving up. It's not about abandoning responsibility or throwing in the towel. Rather, it's about acknowledging that we cannot do everything on our own. We are finite beings, and there are limits to our strength and understanding. Letting go is about realizing that there are things in life that are beyond our control, and trying to maintain control of them only leads to frustration, stress, and burnout. We give him the space to work in ways that we could never have anticipated. Take a moment and think about the things in your life that you're trying to control. Is it a relationship that's not going the way you want? Is it a career path that feels stuck? Or maybe it's an area of your health that just won't improve despite your best efforts. All of these are examples of situations where letting go is the first step toward breakthrough. We may be holding on to expectations or ideas that are limiting our growth. We may be hanging on to past disappointments or fears that are hindering our progress. In these moments, letting go means choosing to release the hold we have on the situation and trusting that God is at work behind the scenes. Letting go is also an act of humility. It requires us to admit that we are not in control and that we don't have all the answers. Humility is the recognition that God is greater than our understanding and his ways are higher than ours. When we let go, we acknowledge that his plan is better and we trust that he will lead us in the right direction. It's about giving up our own limited perspective and submitting to God's infinite wisdom. In doing so, we position ourselves to receive the breakthrough he wants to bring into our lives. Another important aspect of letting go is that it opens the door to peace. When we cling tightly to things, we often experience anxiety and fear about the outcome. We worry about what might happen if things don't go our way, and this worry robs us of our peace. But when we let go and surrender the outcome to God, we open ourselves up to a peace that surpasses understanding. The Bible tells us in Philippians 4:6-7 that when we present our concerns to God in prayer, His peace will guard our hearts and minds. This peace is not dependent on our circumstances. It's rooted in the trust that God is in control and that He will work everything out according to His will. Letting go also requires faith. It's not always easy to release control, especially when we don't know what will happen next. But this is where faith comes in. Faith is trusting that God knows what's best for us, even when we can't see the bigger picture. It's believing that His timing is perfect and that He will provide everything we need. When we let go, we choose to walk by faith, not by sight. We trust that even though we can't see the path ahead, God is already there, preparing the way. Finally, letting go is often the key to seeing God move in powerful ways. When we release control, we create space for God to show up and do what only He can do. So often, we try to solve problems in our own strength, and we miss out on the miraculous because we're relying on ourselves instead of on God. But when we surrender, we allow God to step in and perform the breakthrough we've been waiting for. The miraculous happens when we let go and trust that God is at work, even when we can't see it. Letting go is the first step toward breakthrough because it shifts us from a place of striving to a place of trust. It's a decision to release our own efforts and open ourselves up to God's power. This act of surrender is where God begins to move in our lives in ways that are beyond our comprehension. The breakthrough we long for is often waiting on the other side of letting go.